Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 18th, 2018 edition of SIG Contributor Experience. My name is Christoph Blecker. I will be herding this meeting today. If everyone could add their name to the attendees list in our meeting notes, that'd be great. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. So we'll start off with, are there any new contributors on the call that would like to introduce themselves? I don't see any names I don't recognize, so I don't think so. Hosts for the community meeting. Paris or Elsie, do you know if we're good on that front?
Hey, it's Paris. Sorry to find the mute button. Yes, we are, I believe, good on that front for tomorrow. The meeting is not going to be live streamed, but it will be recorded.
Fantastic. Okay. The graph of the week. We've been putting out a call the last few weeks to try and see if anybody has any suggestions for a graph of the week. We haven't had any in quite a while. I'm going to ask the question again. Does anybody have a graph of the week from DevStats that they are interested in, that they would like to have us present at the community meeting tomorrow? No. Okay. Okay, so moving into our agenda for today, Vlad, got you up first with an update on Focal.
Hey, awesome. So I don't know if I have to do another like 3-second intro into what Focal is, since I don't know how many people are new as opposed to kind of reoccurring.
I would appreciate that. Sorry, I'm used to be reoccurring, but new now.
Sorry?
I would appreciate just a quick update on what it is.
Yeah, okay, great. So it's so basically it's the bot that's running on the Slack channel and like mainly on Kubernetes user. Basically what this thing does is it like looks at all of the questions and answers that are going through, and it tries to kind of extract known questions and answers, or it tries to extract the questions and answers. And then in the future, when somebody asks the same question, it tries to just kind of replay the previous answer so that, you know, well, to help people out, I guess. The other thing is it's also pulling information from Stack Overflow. So then like when somebody goes on the Slack channel and asks a question, if we don't know, we just kind of pull up the Stack Overflow answer for it. Does that kind of give a good, okay. So in the last couple weeks, we've been really focusing a lot on kind of the relevance of the answer that returns. That's still kind of the biggest challenge that we're facing today. Still working on that and still trying to do 1,000 different little things to try to improve the quality of that. Well, it can, like, so if you look at this graph, it's not great today. In the last day or two, it's been mostly like, so basically purple line means that we showed somebody some feedback and it wasn't really that useful. And then the yellow and blue means it was either useful or we actually answered somebody's question. So obviously it's not great. Still really much working on that. That's still number one priority. In the meantime, additionally, we kind of made some changes to this graph thing so I can do historical things, like so I can look at like historical time. And I added actually a new graph in here if anybody cares. It's kind of just tracking message volume of all the messages coming through all of the channels on Kubernetes. So it's only been running for like 2 days, so it's not really too much data, but it's still kind of cool to see that, like, you know, at peak we're getting like 50 messages an hour or something. It's kind of cool. But otherwise, just regular information here, nothing useful. The other thing that was recently added, which again, this is all on the admin site that not too many people have access to, but if you want to see this more and ask George and he'll say, yeah, let's go add you or something, then you kind of see more of this as well. The other thing that was added was like this page for just seeing like all the interactions or seeing all of the actual helpful answers. In the past, this has been like kind of running statistics and stuff, and I could see it, but like, so now it's exposed to you guys to like say, you know, you can see the question that somebody asked, you can click through it, and then you can say, okay, like somebody came in here and said, hey, is there practices on how to expose MySQL, Postgres to external users? And we gave them 2 answers, and the first answer was, well, the context here is how do you expose MySQL to another app? And the context is basically what the last time somebody asked the same question, what was that question? And then like that's the answer. So it's, you know, what's the best practice for exposing MySQL Postgres? And then somebody basically responded, you can use kubectl proxy and stuff like that. And then basically the person gave feedback that this was answered. So, I mean, this is kind of also, you know, this is kind of cool for if anybody wants to see all the stuff that is happening. A lot of it's also for me to be able to just track through what we're answering. And then more importantly, it's like I'm going to go through more of the stuff that we're not answering, because that's kind of the bigger deal here, is to figure out how to fix that relevance. But yeah, and then there's, so basically there's 2 changes on this front end part that some people have access to. And then most of the changes are kind of also on the back end to improve stability and then improve, to try to improve some relevant stuff. So yeah, any questions? Does everything I just made make sense to like everybody here? And they're like, yeah, that's great, cool. I got 1 Bob, okay.
It looks good, and I'm happy to see kind of like the continuous improvements on the application. I think it can definitely be helpful.
I want to echo that. I think this looks awesome. Thank you so much for doing this work, Vlad. I was also wondering if this might be some good content to share at a community meeting. Talk about some of the progress that we've made training it on the channel.
Yeah, actually, George was kind of saying the same thing the other day. He messaged me directly and said, hey, let's do this on the community meeting. And I'm like, okay, great. He's like, the line to do that, to present, is like 2 months. So I'll sign you up when I get back. Okay.
Why don't we actually just insert you as like graph of the week? Because I mean, it doesn't have to be from the DevStats dashboard. I mean, you have graphs.
Okay. So
make a very good point, Elsie. It doesn't have to be from DevStats. We can show some pretty graphs too. I'm supportive of that idea.
Would you be down to do that tomorrow, Vlad?
What time is it?
I think it's at 10.
Yeah, it starts at 10 a.m. Pacific time.
Oh, okay, 10 Pacific. Yeah, not tomorrow. Can we do that? Can I do it the next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Vlad.
Okay, yep. Fantastic. Thanks, Vlad.
Yep, I'm gonna drop off. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. So next item on the agenda is the GitHub Management subproject. I know I've been spearheading this, but I'm guessing Aaron added it to the agenda. Do you have comments you wanted to start, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what the next steps are. I poked Brian Grant about this because there was another change that happened to the GitHub org without people being notified, and it was just a reminder to all of us that we really would love for this project to appear and for a group of people to start taking over these duties and start working on docs. And I'm happy to volunteer as one of these people, but just wondering like what the process is for this.
So where I'm at with it right now, I talked about it in our last Contribex meeting a week ago. I put out the details out to the mailing list on Friday of last week. I set, because it's a bit of a bigger thing, I didn't want to set like the smallest time frame I can. So I set a full week that I would leave, like I would open kind of for comments and opinions. So that closes this Friday. What I will probably do within the next day or so is take what is currently a GitHub issue and change it into a PR. so that there is something to actually commit and approve to the repo once the window closes, if there's no comments or objections. So that I will probably do in the next like day or so. So that once it kind of ticks over on Friday, if everything's good, then we can approve it and actually commit it to the repo and spin up that new sub project. Both the feedback in the issue as well as on email has been supportive of this idea. Is there any, like, having it, now that people have kind of had time to review it, is there any questions or comments that people have on the call today about the new sub project for GitHub Management?
Is it worthwhile to solicit opinions on the SIG Leads distro?
Potentially, like I could forward the email out to the SIG Leads as well. I did when I initially sent it out. I sent it out to us. I sent it out to testing, architecture, and steering, because like the slice of the pie that I'm carving out here bumps up against like things that SIG testing does, things that Contribex does, things that architecture does, and things that steering is like responsible for. So send it out to those lists. It might be good to send it out like and notify another group. I don't see any problem with that. So I could definitely forward that email thread out to leads and say like, hey, this is closing in 2 days. If you have any comments, let us know. I think it's going to be an uncontroversial thing at this point, just because if steering is supportive of it, nobody else owns this slice of pie right now. So it kind of just devolved to steering as, okay, steering makes these decisions because nobody else has kind of stepped up to own the slice of pie officially.
So one of the things I might make explicit is who is allowed to hold owner privileges on the org as a consequence of this decision. That's the thing that might rattle a couple cages, or at least get a couple more people interested, because the list of owners on the Kubernetes org is a lot. Wow, it's 2 pages. It's a lot larger than I would have expected. The owners on the other orgs are generally like steering, and I'm sure steering would be in favor of handing that off to this sub-project almost entirely. So I think that could be a key consequence. Otherwise, like in the abstract, you are a SIG and you are deciding to spin up a new sub-project. It's kind of unclear to me why you would need all of the other SIG's permissions. But I agree, you hit all the touch points.
Yeah, I don't think we need permissions. I think it would, because no other SIG is responsible for this right now, other than the ones that I've kind of named. But I think that point needs to be highlighted even clearer, that that's one thing that we're aiming to do. Because right now, that thing, the org owners list, there isn't anybody who is officially responsible for determining who's on that list and who shouldn't be. I know there's plenty of people who are not even involved in the project anymore, but have super admin permissions to everything.
Yeah, there's one name on that list that scares me. What happens when we remove owner permissions from it? Anyway, yeah, you totally have steering support in the name of like, this is filling a gap, and this is an appropriate responsibility to hand to contributor experience as part of your charter. And I'm super excited. So when can we have it?
Yeah, I'll put together the PR. I hope Jonas is not having some problems, because we've connected like 3 times to the meeting. I hope that I'll get the PR out, and then after Friday we'll be able to kind of officially create the sub project, kind of assume that authority and contributor experience that we're going to start setting these policies, and then be able to and then we can get to work and start writing the policies, making the decisions, figuring out what we're going to do with those things. Okay. Any last comments on GitHub Management subproject? Okay, Moving on, I have a couple other items that I just want to touch on quickly in the same kind of vein as like opening for comments. We already have GitHub issues for these. The next one I had is the new contributor playground. There's 2 new repos that we're looking at starting. I'll talk about the other one later. We're looking at opening up a repo for our contributor website that we'll talk about later. We also would like to open a repo in Kubernetes SIGs as a contributor playground. The idea being having a repo where people can open issues and PRs and interact with bots for new contributor workshops. Last time we did this, we did it in community, and it was, from the workshop side, was extremely successful. People liked being able to open PRs and interact with bots and have permission to do that without people getting angry. On the other side, it was very loud and spammy for those that were watching community for other things like design proposals and caps and all these other things that community does. So we wanted to move that, maintain that idea, but move the experience out of the community repo itself and into its own kind of playground repo. Other issues open. If anybody has any comments on that, that would be great. It's not something that's urgent, but that we'll probably be looking at setting up in the next month or so, so that we have it for future events. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, great. Next one, same kind of vein, like it was just open for comments on our GitHub team structure. We had like the 8 teams. The 8 different teams weren't really working for people. People didn't know which one was which. We wanted to have kind of a base standard team structure for all the teams. Going into like, looking forward to automation where these teams are going to be kind of generated through automation. Membership to the teams will be handled by PRs that SIGs can kind of approve, and then people will get added to these GitHub teams. We wanted to kind of have a standard structure for the teams, and that can be expected for all the different SIGs, but we don't need the kind of like 8 different teams that we had previously. So there's some suggestions on that thread. If anybody has any comments or cares about how GitHub teams are structured, please leave comments there. That will probably be a task that is picked up by the GitHub Management subproject once that subproject is spun up. Questions, comments?
I have comments, but I'll put them on the comment instead of wasting our time here.
Cool. Well, you're up next, Aaron.
Hooray. So basically, that maybe seems to be the umbrella issue of what we want to do with teams going forward. This is maybe me just trying to catch up from being away for so many weeks, but it seems like there was a mailing list discussion about like, hey, why do we have all these teams in the first place, and why are they going to all these Google groups and all this stuff that's a real pain for a new SIG to create? And so the edict was brought down that, yeah, we decided that's not a good idea. So we're not creating any more Google groups, and we're not creating any more users for each new SIG. But I'm having difficulty finding the proposal or umbrella issue that describes what the quote unquote plan is to deal with all of the existing detritus that's around. So I am personally motivated as somebody who never liked these in the first place to excise them as quickly as possible. Mostly there's a set of credentials that I have access to that I would rather not. And so I would like to purge myself of the credentials for the GitHub users. I'm fine shutting down all the Google groups and all that stuff. But perhaps that's me being a little selfishly motivated. Maybe those Google groups have a lot of really great data that somebody else would find super useful. And further, I don't own all of the Katesmere GitHub accounts. A bunch of different people do. And I'm not sure if they're going to care enough to delete them or keep them around for purposes or whatever. So I'm just kind of asking, is there a strategy, or are we just going to kind of let the whatever remains of this explosion of things just lie around?
Can I continue this? As a person who has initially, together with Brian and Grant, we've created this procedure and had this idea of establishing the Google groups and the sub teams on GitHub, and after that we decided that creating the virtual bots, bot users on GitHub can be the easiest way to achieve this goal. So the Google groups have never been intended to contain any useful information. At the same time, some SIGs could use them for some conversations or for something similar, but again, they haven't been ever intended to contain something, some really useful data for most of us. The initial idea was to keep the general mailing list, the general Google group, like the SIG full mailing list, to have all the major conversations. And these groups are only, actually these groups had been created only to have an ability to easily receive the email address to create the GitHub bot, to create a GitHub user that will act as a bot. So from my standpoint, we can easily remove these groups. We probably have to send the late notice to Kubernetes dev and to SIG leads, mentioning to them that we are going to remove all these groups, to delete all these groups, and we are done, like in the next few weeks. So that can be a goal. In general, we have to agree that this idea was more painful than successful, and I hope that all of us have sorted out our painful GitHub notifications in a different way.
I mean, my notifications are still awful, but one of the personal comments is I never actually saw anybody point to data that showed how it was or wasn't working. Just the human experience of pain, and it's annoying. But nobody ever showed me like, oh, they're actually being used by stuff. Like I tried to take that approach, and when I looked at dev stats, it seemed like some people were actually using the PR reviews thing, which is probably what motivated Christoph to suggest we have a PR reviews sub-team. And I would love to go find the rest of that data, but it appears as though it got blown away out of dev stats. I guess when we decided to stop, at some point in time, we decided to stop tracking how those teams are mentioned in dev stats. And so like, it's just a little sad to see like yet another non-data driven decision. And like a lack of a proposal for like, hey, here's why we're doing this and here's what's going to happen. So if you're volunteering to like do that, here's what's going to happen, and try to rally all of the owners of the Google groups and the GitHub user accounts, I would really welcome that.
I have to mention that, for example, we've been actively using the features subgroups under the features repo and scope of SIG-PM and feature activities in the release cycle. But again, I can expect that most of people have been using simply the generic MISC groups to mention all of the SIG members, and that's all. The only other way how these groups could be used was proposed by SIG testing, to use them with some kind of bots. I don't remember who exactly from SIG testing has proposed that in like a week or so, a week or two ago, but that was like yet another suggestion, how can we use these groups? But that's a bit niche solution.
Okay, I can follow up. Like I said, I'm not really trying to drill into the details here. I'm trying to point out that it doesn't seem like there was a cohesive plan, and I'm not sure there is one that's documented, and I would appreciate seeing that. Like I know it's, or like an open acknowledgement that, hey, it's just like too much work to go and contact each of the owners of all of the Google groups and all of the GitHub accounts, and we're just going to let them fall by the wayside after we kick them out of the Kubernetes org. And like, so what if a bunch of random Kubernetes -foo Google groups show up in Google results? Like that's fine.
I am a member of all these Google groups, so I can manually check all of them if they contain something, or delete. So we can send a notice to Kubernetes dev and repeating that at the Thursday community meeting that we are going to shut down all those groups and delete them in the next few weeks, set some formal deadline. And at some critical point of time when we will decide that we are ready to shut down, then I can check the contents of these groups and remove them.
You're going to need the two-factor auth codes for all the GitHub users as well in order to remove those things.
So I can't remove the GitHub users, but I can request them. And I'm a member of all these Google groups because it was a part of the procedure to add me and Sarah as the owners to these Google groups. So I have to be an owner of all these Google groups and I'll be able to remove them. And also I will request the two-factor GitHub codes to remove the users.
Okay, so can I expect to see all of that process written down in a Google Doc or a mailing list or a GitHub issue?
We can start working with Google Doc and share that in the mailing list. So
Okay.
if Christoph would like to work on that, I'm happy to contribute there. Or I can work on that if Christoph doesn't have enough capacity.
Yeah, my capacity at this individual moment is limited, and that's why I specifically haven't taken this on. I've been kind of working on some other things, but the way this kind of came about, Aaron, and to kind of go back to one of your earlier questions, like where this whole decision-making process came about, is it actually started from George, from this is really painful spinning up a new SIG kind of thing. Can we at least stop the bleeding going forward and remove the procedures and remove the stuff that says you need to do this for every new SIG or working group that kind of starts up?
Yeah,
so
I saw that.
we
That's
kind of
fine.
stopped the bleeding moving forward, but no, we haven't had a plan thus far for how to like holistically clean that up. Like, are we getting rid of the Google? Are we getting rid of the GitHub users? Are we getting rid of the Google groups? How do we go about doing that? None of that's been written down yet.
Right, and that's the part. I'm just asking for even like a placeholder for to-do plan to be written here by Ihor. Like,
I can start working on it. Yep.
And it's the thing that I selfishly am just going to go ahead and do for SIG testing, and I may do it for SIG scalability because I have the keys. On a somewhat related note, I'm going to be looking at making a new Google group for SIG testing as an email list to catch alerts from test grid and try and make sure that it's like a high signal mailing list, and then maybe make sure that this is a great pattern that other SIGs could follow to be alerted when their tests go from a stable green to red. And I'm unclear on if I should be interacting with folks here to drive that as a process or policy.
I don't, just my off the top of my head opinion, I don't care. SIG testing can go and create as many email lists as they want that are outside of the standard. We care about the standard that we expect every SIG to have. So we know where the point of where to go and contact them. But if you want to go and create things in addition to that, if SIGs, like even the team structure, if a SIG wants to go and drive, hey, we have a need for a new team outside of the base structure, I would say go for it. That would be in the purview of the SIG to kind of decide what works best for them. But the kind of base framework that every SIG needs to have because other people are expecting that SIG to have it, that's kind of where I have more opinions.
Okay, and we might get there. I think we want to sort of proof of concept. Hey, look, if you use a sig-foo-alerts email list, then your SIG can have an on-call rotation for when your tests fail. This is kind of in service of trying to make the CI signal role for the release team not a pseudo build cop, because I swear I thought we retired that role, but everybody seems to rely on that person catching which tests are failing where, and I would like to find ways to delegate that responsibility back to SIGs with notifications that are properly routed. So I guess I'll share more when I have more.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
How about the formal deadline to shut down everything on August 15 in around 1 month?
For the GitHub users and the Google groups?
Yeah, for everything.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I think a month is plenty of time for people to go and like see if there's anything useful and, you know, kick up a fuss if that's the case.
Yeah, perfect. All right, I'll start working on the doc. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time this week, but I'll try to make something to discuss at the next contributor experience meeting next Wednesday, with their formal announcement that can be shared on Wednesday or Thursday with the mailing list where Kubernetes dev, and repeating that at the Thursday community meeting next week. If we'll agree on everything next week at the contributor experience meeting.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ira.
Yeah, and we'll have around 3 weeks for all people to share the 2FA codes with me and allow me to collect all the data to shut down everything on August 15. The only question that I still have, so first of all, should we rename the GitHub teams back to the original naming, or should we keep the MISC suffix there, like the main?
I think the things that the things that we need to target as far as cleanup are the GitHub users, the mirror users, and the Google groups. The teams themselves that are created today, I would like to keep them the way they are and not rename them until we kind of have, okay, we have consensus on what the new name should be, and kind of handle that as its own thing, because we're keeping the teams. That's the one part of this that we're actually going to keep, is we're going to keep using teams. But I'd also like to, that's the one thing that I'd like to get more feedback from the SIGs on, that like, hey, if somebody's using like the PR reviews team, if somebody's using the PR reviews team as part of their SIG and we're keeping that, we might want to query with them, like who should be on that team? Do you want to update the team membership on that team? Who should be the maintainers of these teams that can like approve and remove users until such time as we have automation to do that for us?
I get it. But we are not enforcing the new SIGs to create multiple teams, right? So we're keeping the old multiple SIG GitHub teams only for historical reasons. As Sarah is describing in the chat right now. Yeah, I agree with that. It was difficult.
Exactly. The GitHub team renames and managing the teams, that's all easy because it all can be done by any org owner and we all have visibility into it. So that's a lot easier to do than the mirror GitHub accounts or the Google groups.
Yeah, and SIG.YAML has, like, it lists out the SIG teams anyway and descriptions for what those SIG teams should be used for. So if a new SIG creates their own teams doing whatever, because Christoph doesn't care, that's great, as long as they put in descriptions for what that's for, so they're a good SIG and their members know why those teams are there and what they can be used for.
Okay, yep, sounds good. So yeah, we've agreed on plan for the next week.
Okay, great. Any last comments on that before we move on? Okay. Next item on the agenda, I just wanted to bring up in this meeting, George sent out an email about spinning up a new repo in Kubernetes SIG for the contributor site. We already have a KEP and stuff opened for the new contributor site. And that is kind of a continuing effort, but we needed a place to store the code. If anybody has any questions or comments, you can either voice them here or reply to that email thread.
Thank you for having an explicit lazy consensus vote on the site.
So that brings us to the end of what's written down in our agenda. Is there any other topics that anybody would like to bring up and discuss? We have about roughly 20 minutes left. Otherwise, we can give people time back. Gwen.
Me. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the meeting, but something I've run into pretty frequently lately is that membership doesn't transfer between Kubernetes org and Kubernetes SIGs org. And I think it's a problem. I don't know that we should necessarily have them be the same, but is there a policy? Is there a reason? What, how does this work? I was disappointed because I wanted to assign myself things and it didn't work.
So right now, the policy is a little vague. Yes, there isn't anything explicitly set out. One of the things that I'm hoping that the GitHub management subproject is going to be able to kind of settle as far as like what our policies are around the actual GitHub permissions. From our community standpoint, once you're a member of our community, that membership kind of transfers everywhere. Like you're a member of the community. The community isn't just the GitHub org.
Right.
Well, once you're at that member level in the community, if you need access, member level GitHub access to another org and you have a reason for it, then yes, what Aaron is saying right now in chat, you email Kubernetes membership and you say, I need access to this SIG. I'm already a member of the Kubernetes org. And then it's very easy for one of us to add you and give you those permissions.
Okay,
it's not
cool.
explicitly spelled out. Yes. And PR's welcome to update the policy and that kind of stuff. But also the intent, one of the intents of the automation that is being worked over on SIG testing, Eric, myself, and some other people working on Terbolos. The idea is we want syncing between those things. So you get membership in Kubernetes, you will automatically get membership in Kubernetes SIGs as well. And those things can kind of be mirrored across orgs.
Right. Yeah. I was just like, do I have to join the Illuminati before? I don't know. I didn't know to ask. So I've been doing a couple PRs also, over there. So
if you're a Kubernetes member, and this is open to, and this applies to everybody. If you are a Kubernetes member and there is a reason that you need membership over in Kubernetes SIGs, all you got to do is ask for it right now today. That will be automatically granted in the future. The other thing that I want to do before we turn on like auto syncing is purging and purging stale members out of our Kubernetes org. I had an issue that I'd opened with Lucas over for the DevStats stuff, and there were a surprisingly large amount of people who have permissions in the Kubernetes org and have not touched the Kubernetes org in a long time. Not just as we mentioned earlier in this call, GitHub owners, but also just regular members who have access to a whole bunch of teams and a whole bunch of stuff, but are not actively using because we haven't done idle purges. So that is something that I want to tackle before we turn on automatic syncing and start inviting all these idle people to a new org and give them more permissions. But that's the intent, is that we will have tooling to be able to allow people, once you're a member in the community, that membership should transfer to any of the Kubernetes orgs that are kind of like active and pertinent. It probably won't to things like the Kubernetes graveyard or Kubernetes retired and stuff like that are like pseudo active, but the things like Kubernetes and Kubernetes SIGs, absolutely, the membership should be transferable so that there isn't like, Kubernetes SIGs aren't second class repos.
Right. Or, yeah, I was just surprised. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it's a different org. That's a GitHub thing. Is that a community thing? Cool. I can open that PR. So yeah, I need a demo PR for something anyway. So
I have a question regarding that membership, because right now, as you say, you send an email over, you need a two plus ones. Then what happens? Who's responsible for adding people to the Kubernetes org? Because I'm in that process right now, and I have 2+1s, and I'm not in the Kubernetes org.
So Very good question. That's part of the whole GitHub management sub-project. Because right now it's all kind of a, tribal knowledge, like, people who have access do the thing. It's mostly Ihor and Caleb that take care of sending those invites. Garrett and myself also have access, and we send out some invites here and there to speed things along. But it's kind of like the four of us, even though our owner list is stupid long, but there's a bunch of people that have access but don't do it. But it's mostly those four people: Ihor, Caleb, Garrett, myself, that kind of take care of the inviting new people. But that's not written down anywhere, so you don't know that unless you kind of ask. But that's something we're looking to fix and formalize. That, like, hey, these are the people who are responsible for that role, and should there come a time that, if Ihor and Caleb, who are doing the vast majority of them, if either of them move on to other responsibilities and no longer do that, we need somebody to fill that role. So those kind of things we need to kind of tighten up and formalize so that we can handle that should that situation arise, that we know, like, hey, if something happens to Ihor and Caleb, they change jobs, they take on different responsibilities and don't have time for that anymore, we need to be able to hand that off.
Well, formally, the Kubernetes membership group is responsible for that, and all the GitHub org owners are able to do that technically, but yeah. And also, I have to mention that in real time, I've just invited you, Jonas, to GitHub Kubernetes org.
Yay! Thank you.
Sorry, that was
congratulations.
Yeah, no worries. I was just wondering if there was anything else I needed to do, so I just wanted to clear that up. Thank you.
Yeah, so just the best option up. We probably may set something like the SLA for us, like for me, for Caleb, and for other people who are responsible for that. Like 1 week after receiving the second +1. So please don't disturb us, and we'll send an invite for you. And if we are not sending an invite in their agreed time, like 1 week, so please ping us directly.
Yeah, this is all stuff that we want to get documented explicitly as part of that GitHub management sub-project. So we know who's responsible, what kind of timelines, what can you expect. Because right now, all of that stuff that we know, like people who've been around for a while know in our heads, none of it's written down.
Yep.
So that's kind of my goal there, is to have a house for all those kind of policies and procedures and stuff.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, last call. Anything anybody else wants to bring up?
Yeah, just one note from me. I just checked my calendar for the next week, and I noticed, and I forgot that I'm traveling next week and be at GCP next. I checked the calendar, and it seems that the Wednesday after the next Wednesday is August 1st. So if that will work for everybody here, as we've agreed, I'd like to move the formal deadline of having the draft for the expected shutdown of the Google Groups, GitHub users, and everything else to August 1st. That will be a Wednesday in 2 weeks. And we will finally, and August 15th is agreed. So it seems that we have enough time just to have everything documented until August 1st. Any objections?
Okay. No objections from me. Anybody else?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Thanks, Ihor. Okay, last call.
Contribex, I missed you. It's so great to be back.
We missed you too, Aaron. Okay, fantastic. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Have a good one. Thanks for attending.